There is a photograph from 1984. A small group of people standing outside a restaurant in San Bernardino, California. There are speeches. There are cameras. The restaurant is being turned into a museum. One of the men in the photograph is named Dick McDonald. He invented this restaurant. He drew the kitchen floor plan on a tennis court with chalk in 1948. He redesigned the American food industry from the ground up in a single afternoon. The restaurant is named after him. His name is on the sign. His name is on 43,000 signs around the world. He is standing outside his own restaurant's museum, and he feels, by multiple accounts, like a stranger at his own funeral. The official story of McDonald's is one of the most famous business stories ever told. A milkshake machine salesman. A parking lot in California. Vision recognized where others saw only a hamburger stand. 3 decades of relentless building. One of the most powerful consumer brands in human history. That story is true. Every word of it. It is also, in the ways that matter most for anyone trying to build something, incomplete. This episode is the complete version. Not a takedown. Not a myth-breaking exercise. Something more useful than either. We are going to cover the brothers who built the system and were erased from the story. The financial architect who invented the mechanism that made everything work, and who was paid $3 million for a contribution worth close to $1 billion. The broken promise at a closing table that cost one family over $100 million a year. What the empire did to the American food supply, and what it cost, personally, financially, and morally, to build something that outlasted everyone involved. David Senra has covered Ray Kroc on the Founders Podcast. If you have not heard that episode, it is worth your time. He covers the obsession, the grinding decades, the relentlessness. What we are doing today is different. We add what that episode does not cover. The question at the center of this episode is one I want you to hold for the next hour. What does it cost to build something that outlasts you? By the end of this episode, you will have a very specific, very uncomfortable answer. Let's start from the beginning. Richard and Maurice McDonald, Dick and Mac, were the sons of Irish immigrants from New Hampshire. Dick was the ideas man. Restless, inventive, always redesigning things in his head. Mac was the operator. Steadier, more cautious, the one who turned Dick's ideas into working systems. They moved to California in the 1930s looking for work in the film industry. They found none. They ended up running a hot dog stand near a movie studio in Monrovia. They moved to San Bernardino in 1940 and opened a drive-in barbecue restaurant. It did well. Then, in 1948, Dick McDonald had an idea that most people would have considered insane. They closed the restaurant for 3 months. They fired all their car hops. They threw away their full menu. And they reopened as something that had never existed before. They called it the Speedee service system, after their mascot, a little cartoon chef with a hamburger for a head, always in motion. The restaurant world noticed. Not immediately, but they noticed. Ray Kroc was born in 1902 in Oak Park, Illinois. His father was a Western Union agent. His mother taught piano. From his earliest days, Kroc's gift was clear. He could talk to anyone, read a room in seconds, and make people believe in something before they had fully decided to. He sold paper cups as a teenager. He tried real estate briefly during the Florida boom years, and it ended badly. He played piano in small venues. He spent 17 years selling the multi-mixer milkshake machine across America. He was good at selling. He had always been good at selling. What he had never been, by any conventional measure, was successful. By the time he drove to San Bernardino in the spring of 1954, he was 52 years old. He had diabetes. His joints ached. His gallbladder was gone. By any honest reading, Ray Kroc in the spring of 1954 was a man whose moment appeared to have passed. He had been hearing unusual things about a hamburger stand in California, using 8 of his multi-mixer machines simultaneously. 56 milkshake spindles running at once. In 30 years of calling on restaurants, he had never seen a single location order like that. He drove out to see what was happening. Before we get to what Kroc found in that parking lot, you need to understand the world he drove into. Because the McDonald brothers had not built a better restaurant. They had built something the industry did not have a name for yet. The dominant model in American food service in 1948 was the drive-in. White Castle had pioneered the hamburger chain in the 1920s. Dairy Queen arrived in 1940. A&W had been selling root beer and burgers since 1919. By the late 1940s, the drive-in format was everywhere, car hops on roller skates, extensive menus, food prepared to order, 15 to 30 minutes of waiting time. The food was inconsistent. The costs were high, and the franchise model powering these chains had a structural flaw already visible to anyone paying close attention. When a company sold an entire territory to a franchisee, a city, a county, a state, they received a large upfront payment. But they also surrendered the ability to control what happened inside that territory. Once you sell a geography, you lose the leverage to enforce your standards. Nobody had solved this problem. It would take someone who had never run a restaurant to solve it, and the solution would have nothing to do with food. Three rivals defined the world. Kroc was entering. Burger King was founded in Jacksonville, Florida in 1953, 1 year before Kroc drove to San Bernardino. Their entire identity was built as a critique of McDonald's. Flame-grilled instead of flat-grill. Customizable instead of standardized. Have it your way, their 1974 campaign was a direct attack on the McDonald's assembly line model. The critique was valid. What they could not replicate was the system beneath the product. Colonel Sanders had been franchising Kentucky Fried Chicken informally since the early 1950s. His insight was different. Standards could be maintained through a proprietary recipe that franchisees couldn't replicate independently even if they wanted to. The secret was the secret. What he couldn't build was the real estate mechanism that would eventually make McDonald's structurally unassailable. Howard Johnson had built a chain of hundreds of locations by the 1950s with recognizable orange roofs and a consistent menu. He proved that national brand consistency was achievable at scale. He also showed its limit. Without a structural control mechanism beneath the brand, without a lever that could be pulled if quality drifted, the standards eventually eroded. Howard Johnson's declined. The brand outlasted the discipline. None of them had found the structural solution. None of them understood, yet that the answer was not operational. It was architectural, and it was sitting under their feet the whole time. Now go back to the parking lot in San Bernardino. A 52-year-old milkshake machine salesman steps out of his car and watches something he has never seen before. It is the summer of 1948. Two brothers are standing on a tennis court in San Bernardino. They are not playing tennis. Dick McDonald has brought chalk. He is drawing the floor plan of their kitchen on the court surface. He marks every station. The fryer here. The grill here. The assembly counter here. Mac watches, arms folded, waiting to see where this is going. Then Dick starts moving things. The problem he is solving is not small. The drive-in is profitable but exhausting. 20 car hops, constant turnover, a 25-item menu, customers waiting 15 minutes for food that arrives differently every time. Dick has arrived at a conclusion that is, for 1948, genuinely radical. The entire model is wrong. Not improvable. Wrong. Here is what they have designed after months of argument and refinement. Strip everything to 9 items. No car hops. Customers walk up to a window. No china, everything in paper. No made-to-order preparation. A small menu produced continuously in large batches, assembled in 30 seconds. Every station designed around one task only. What they are doing, though neither has the vocabulary to say it, is applying the principles of the Ford assembly line to food preparation. Henry Ford figured this out for cars in 1913. Dick McDonald has figured it out for hamburgers on a tennis court 35 years later, with chalk. They close for 3 months. They rebuild the kitchen entirely. In December 1948, they reopen. The line stretches around the block on the first day. Within 2 years, revenue has more than doubled. Labor costs have fallen so sharply that they can sell a hamburger for 15 cents, less than half their competitor's price, and make more money than before. What Dick invented was not a faster restaurant. It was a system, a set of interlocking processes that could only produce the intended result if every component worked exactly as designed. A faster restaurant can be copied with money and effort. A system where quality is structural, where it emerges from the architecture rather than from individual skill, is genuinely hard to replicate. The genius was in the design. The thing neither brother understood yet was that they had designed something that could be reproduced anywhere in the world. That insight would belong to someone else entirely. The most defensible competitive advantage is not a product or a price. It is a system so precisely designed that the quality it produces cannot exist without every component working in sequence. Build the system. The product takes care of itself. Step back for a moment. Dick McDonald drew a kitchen on a tennis court. 35 years after Ford figured out how to build a car on an assembly line, someone finally asked the same question about food. Jeff Bezos did something structurally identical at Amazon. He did not build a better bookstore. He built a fulfillment system so precise that the product moving through it became almost incidental. The pattern is the same. The tennis court is always the beginning. The question you should be asking about your own business is this: where's my tennis court moment? What have I been doing the slow, laborious way because I have never stopped to draw it all out? The Speedee service system attracted immediate attention. Not just customers, but other restaurant operators who drove from neighboring counties just to watch. The brothers began receiving letters asking if the model could be replicated elsewhere. They were operators, not builders. The person who would understand the full commercial significance of what they had created was, at this point, still driving across Illinois selling milkshake machines to people who did not yet need 8 of them. This is a story about a salesman at the end of his road, and what he found when he got there. It is spring of 1954. A 52-year-old man is driving east across the Mojave Desert towards San Bernardino. He has a multi-mixer demonstration unit in the back seat and an unusual order in his pocket. 8 machines to a single hamburger stand. Understand what 52 meant for this man specifically. He had spent his entire adult life chasing the large thing. He had always believed it was there, the opportunity that matched his specific combination of capabilities. He had looked for it in paper cups, in real estate, in the multi-mixer. None of them had been quite right. And now his joints ached in cold mornings. The arthritis in his hands made steering wheels painful. By any honest reading, Ray Kroc in the spring of 1954 was a man in physical decline, watching his moment pass him by. He parks outside the restaurant and does not go in immediately. He watches. It is 10 in the morning, and there is already a line at 2 walk-up windows. No tables, no car hops, no menus. People approach, pay 15 cents for a hamburger, and their food appears in 30 seconds. Kroc watches for 2 hours. The kitchen confirms everything. Every motion has been accounted for. The grill man does one thing. The fry cook does one thing. The hamburgers are not approximately the same. They are genuinely identical, because the system physically does not permit variation. He is 52 years old and he understands. With the specific physical clarity of a man who almost missed it, this is it. Not a good restaurant. A system that can be reproduced in every city in America. He calls Dick McDonald the next morning. The brothers are reluctant. They walk to work. They are comfortable. Their life is excellent by any ordinary measure. Kroc makes the argument that will define the next 20 years. If you don't let someone do this properly, someone will copy it badly. The brothers say yes. Kroc drives back across the Mojave with a handshake agreement. No salary, no office, no staff. Kroc did not discover something new in San Bernardino. He recognized something the brothers had built, but could not fully see. The brothers understood their system as operators, from the inside, running it every day. Kroc understood it as an architect, from outside, grasping immediately that it could be reproduced. These are entirely different capabilities. Most founders have the first. Very few have the second. The person who builds a great system and the person who scales it are rarely the same person. If you have built something extraordinary, find the person who can see it from outside and will give everything to replicate it. If you are that person, find the builder. Together you are worth more than either of you will ever be alone. Consider what that means in practice. Steve Jobs once said creativity is just connecting things. What Kroc connected, in a parking lot in 1954, was a 40-year-old industrial manufacturing insight in an industry that had never thought to apply it. The brothers did the creative work. Kroc did the connecting. You do not have to invent the principle. You have to be in the room where the principle is being applied for the first time in a new context. And you have to be willing to bet everything on what you see. Kroc drives back to Chicago with a handshake agreement and a contract that will, he does not yet fully understand, nearly break him before it makes him rich. Here is a story about a cage dressed up as an opportunity. The agreement is straightforward and quietly devastating. Kroc will be the exclusive franchise agent for McDonald's across the United States. He receives 1.4% of net sales from every franchisee he signs. The brothers take half a point of that. Every significant operational change requires written approval from both brothers. Now the arithmetic, because it matters. A franchisee who sells $200,000 of food in a year generates 1.4% for Kroc. That is $2,800. Out of that $2,800, Kroc must pay his salary, his rent, his support staff, the people who train new franchisees, the legal costs, the accounting, everything. He is not just failing to profit. He is personally subsidizing the growth of other people's businesses. The brothers receive their half point without bearing a dollar of those costs. Kroc signs. He signs because he is 52 years old. He signs because he believes in the system more than he fears the terms. And he signs because, at some level he cannot fully articulate, he already knows that a contract only constrains the person who accepts its constraints as final. Put yourself in that room. It is late 1954. The contract takes half a point off the top before you see a dollar. Every decision requires sign-off from two men in California who will not move. You cannot afford a lawyer to renegotiate. You cannot walk away. This is the last great opportunity you are going to get. Do you sign? And if you sign, knowing what you know about leverage and patience, what do you do on day one to start growing around the cage? In any constrained relationship, build your value into the system before the contract needs enforcing. Contracts can be renegotiated. Irreplaceability cannot. This is the specific insight most accounts of the early Kroc years miss entirely. He did not fight the brothers' contract. He grew around it. By the time the contract became a serious obstacle, he had built so much operational value, so many trained franchisees, so much field knowledge, so many relationships, that the brothers needed his cooperation more than he needed their approval. The cage was real. He built himself out of it by making himself more valuable than the bars. Ask yourself where in your own situation you are accepting a constraint as permanent that could be made irrelevant by building the right kind of value around it. By 1956, Kroc has signed enough franchisees to see the fundamental problem clearly. The 1.4% model cannot sustain what he is trying to build. Every new location costs him more than it earns him. He is going broke. He needs a different financial architecture entirely. The person who gives it to him will walk into his office one afternoon and say something that will change the company forever. 1956. Ray Kroc is sitting in his small Chicago office looking at numbers that do not work. Dozens of franchisees. Restaurants running well. Customers happy. And he is personally going broke. Then a man named Harry Sonneborn walks in. Sonneborn is 36 years old. He has been watching McDonald's from the outside, and he has worked through the logic. He sits down. He looks at Kroc's numbers. He nods. Then he says, with the calm of a man who already knows the answer, "You are not in the restaurant business. You are in the real estate business. You just haven't understood that yet." Here is the problem Sonneborn is solving. Kroc's only income from each franchise is the royalty on their sales. His franchisees need physical locations. When a franchisee finds their own site and signs their own lease, they have something Kroc cannot afford them to have: independence. Sonneborn's proposal is this. McDonald's Corporation finds the site. McDonald's negotiates the long-term lease directly with the property owner or purchases the land outright. McDonald's then subleases that site to the franchisee at a significant markup, typically 40 to 100% above what McDonald's is paying. The franchisee gets a ready-made location. McDonald's gets two income streams from every location: the lease markup and the sales royalty. But here is the part most people miss, and it is the most important part. The lease payment is structurally different from the royalty. The royalty fluctuates with sales. The lease payment does not fluctuate. It is a fixed obligation the franchisee must meet before they pay themselves, before they pay their staff, before they pay for food. McDonald's gets paid before anyone else does. And this is the insight that changes everything. The real estate model was not primarily a financial strategy. It was a control strategy. If a franchisee deviates from McDonald's standards, McDonald's can refuse to renew their lease. The franchisee's entire investment, the equipment, the fit-out, the customer base, everything they have built, sits on land that McDonald's controls. Compliance is not optional. It is the condition of having a business at all. Sonneborn explains all of this and says, precisely, we are not in the food business. We are in the real estate business. The only reason we sell 15-cent hamburgers is because they are the greatest producer of revenue from which our tenants can pay us rent. To fund the first wave of acquisitions, Sonneborn does not go to banks. Kroc's finances are too precarious. He goes to insurance companies. In the 1950s, insurance companies manage enormous pools of capital that must be deployed into stable, long-duration assets. McDonald's real estate, long-term leases, predictable income, is exactly what they need. The price is equity. Sonneborn gives up 22.5% of McDonald's ownership to raise the capital. Kroc goes quiet for a long time. Then he says, "You are going to be my financial vice president. When your business depends on other people's execution, find a way to get paid before they pay themselves." The most durable revenue is structural and fixed, not performance-based. The most powerful control mechanism is not legal. It is the asset your partners cannot function without. Consider the companies that replicated this logic in different contexts. Visa and MasterCard do not lend money. They own the rails that every company who lends money is forced to use. Amazon does not just sell goods. It owns the cloud infrastructure that its largest competitors depend on to run their businesses. Apple controls the App Store, the only legal gateway to a billion of the most valuable consumers on Earth. Sonneborn's insight in 1956, "Put yourself between the operator and the asset they cannot do without," is one of the most durable strategic templates in modern business. The question for you is this. In your business, what is the infrastructure layer that everyone in your industry depends on? Is there a way to own it? With the real estate model in place and the insurance company capital secured, there was one remaining constraint on Kroc's freedom. The two brothers in San Bernardino who still own the name, the trademarks, and a half-point claim on every dollar of royalties. That constraint was about to become intolerable. If you are finding value in what we are covering today, there is a written companion document for this episode. It is a deep dive that goes well beyond the audio. The complete real estate mechanism fully mapped out. The Sonneborn model in full detail. The mythology audit, the empire's financial numbers today, and what Kroc would specifically do in 2026. Everything we cover in this episode and more, in one place you can return to. The link is in the description below, for less than the price of a coffee. If you want it there when you need to go back to it, grab it now. Otherwise, let's keep going. Spring of 1961. Ray Kroc needs $2,700,000 by Tuesday. The McDonald brothers have named their price. Everything, the name, the trademarks, the Golden Arches design, their royalty claim, for $2,700,000. Split between them, taxed, it comes to approximately $1 million each. Dick McDonald's stated ambition had always been to become a millionaire. Here was his price. Kroc does not have it. Sonneborn goes back to the insurance companies. Another tranche of McDonald's ownership exchanged for the cash. The closing happens. Papers are signed. Checks change hands. Dick McDonald, who drew the kitchen on that tennis court 13 years earlier, signs away his name, his design, his system, everything. He uses his $1 million to buy a house near the original restaurant in San Bernardino. The same restaurant he had been walking to from his previous house for over a decade. Then, at the closing, something happens that is not in the papers. Kroc pulls Dick aside. He offers something informal, not written into the purchase agreement, not witnessed. A verbal promise made at the end of a long day when everyone is tired and relieved and the deal is done. He will honor a 1% royalty to the brothers as a gesture of gratitude. It is not in writing. Kroc never pays a dollar of it. By the time Kroc died in 1984, that 1% royalty would have been worth over $100 million per year. Mac McDonald died in 1971. Dick McDonald lived until 1998 in the house he bought with his $1 million, watching the company built on his system become the largest restaurant company in history. He received nothing from its growth after the day those papers were signed. Late in his life, Dick McDonald said something quietly devastating. If he had known what Kroc was going to build, he would have negotiated completely differently. Not with bitterness. With the specific regret of a man who made a reasonable decision with incomplete information and then spent 40 years watching what the full information would have changed. This is not primarily a story about dishonesty. It is a story about what happens when the trust that makes it possible to build together gets confused with the precision required to protect what was built. Dick McDonald had the builder's trust, the open-handed confidence that makes intense collaboration possible. What he lacked, at the critical moment, was the lawyer's precision. The handshake promise is the most expensive sentence in business. When something matters enough to say at a closing, It matters enough to write into the agreement before the lawyers leave the room. Not because people are dishonest. Because memory is selective, circumstances change, and what felt like generosity in one moment looks very different 10 years later. The Wozniak parallel is exact. When Apple was forming, Wozniak's equity arrangement was handled informally during a period of intense trust and mutual excitement. The informality that felt natural in the beginning became the source of the bitterest disputes later, precisely because the goodwill that made documentation feel unnecessary was the first thing to disappear when the money became significant. If you are building something with someone right now, and there is an arrangement between you that lives only in your shared memory of a conversation, write it down tonight. Not because you distrust each other, because you should not have to rely on perfect memory of a moment that was made before the stakes were this high. 1957. Ray Kroc is on the phone with McDonald about powdered milkshake mix. Kroc wants to switch his franchisees from fresh milk-based milkshakes to a cheaper powdered mix. The reasons are practical. Doesn't spoil, cheaper per serving, easier to prepare consistently. McDonald says no. The franchise agreement requires written approval from both brothers for significant changes. Kroc hangs up and makes the switch anyway. He waits for the response. He waits for the letter from the brothers' lawyer. The call does not come. It does not come because the brothers understand something they cannot say aloud. Enforcing the contract would require starting a war with a man who has become the operational center of their entire network. The franchisees are loyal to Kroc, not to a letterhead in California. A legal fight over milkshake mix would not just be expensive. It could destroy the value of everything the contract is designed to protect. What Kroc has understood is that the brothers hold legal rights they cannot exercise without damaging the asset those rights are meant to protect. He is all in. McDonald's is his only enterprise, his entire identity. For the brothers, losing means losing income from an arrangement they never fully believed in. In any sustained conflict, the person who cannot afford to lose has a different kind of resolve from the person who would prefer not to. Before any significant conflict, ask one question before you ask anything else. Who has more to lose from this going wrong? That answer tells you more about the real balance of power than any contract or any org chart ever will. Elon Musk used exactly this logic during the Tesla financing crises of 2008 and 2013. In both cases, the investors who might have pushed him out faced a worse outcome from doing so, a disorderly failure, than from backing him through. His willingness to hold on past the point where most founders would have capitulated was the negotiating position. Kroc was doing the same thing with far less explicit calculation and far more desperation. Asymmetric commitment is a real and usable form of leverage. It is not comfortable. It is effective. By 1960, Kroc has proven something to himself that he cannot unprove. The brothers are a constraint on what McDonald's needs to become. The buyout resolves that. What the buyout creates is a new problem. Who, and what, would be the public face of a system growing faster than any system had grown before? February 1961. A group of McDonald's franchisees is sitting in the basement of a restaurant in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Folding chairs, a chalkboard, a 29-year-old man named Fred Turner at the front of the room with a notebook full of procedures. Turner started at McDonald's as a grill man at a single Chicago location. He moved up because he paid attention to everything, could not observe a process without thinking about how to improve it, and because Kroc recognized in Turner the same quality that had made the McDonald brothers' kitchen extraordinary. The problem Turner is solving is the problem that defines the next century of business. How do you reproduce the original quality when the original people are no longer in the room? The brothers solved this for one restaurant. Their system was so precisely designed that quality was structural. It lived in the layout, the tools, the sequence of tasks. But as McDonald's grew from dozens to hundreds to thousands of locations, a new problem emerged. A perfect kitchen system, deployed without training and enforcement, degrades. Every person who substitutes their own judgment for the system's instructions, even once, even with good intentions, weakens the architecture. Turner's curriculum is specific to the point that outsiders find it absurd. The correct grill temperature to the degree. The exact weight of a raw beef patty before cooking. The precise number of onion shreds on a standard hamburger, not approximately the right number, the exact number. The the specific sequence of movements for wrapping a finished burger. Not because any individual detail is critical in isolation, because the aggregate of every detail, performed consistently by every person at every location, is what produces the food quality that customers drive past competitors to reach. Turner understood something most people don't. The right way must be easier to follow than any alternative. You are not trying to make people comply with the correct procedure. You are trying to make the correct procedure so obvious, so well-trained, so embedded in the physical layout, that any other approach requires more effort. Quality becomes the path of least resistance. At scale, culture is not enough. Values are not enough. You need procedures, specific, documented, trained procedures for every decision that affects quality. Not because you distrust your people, because inconsistency, even from the best-intentioned people, destroys what you built faster than any competitor ever will. Turner will eventually become chief executive of McDonald's. Under his leadership, the company reaches its operational peak. The food is as consistent as it has ever been at any scale. It is also Turner's departure from operational primacy and the slow replacement of his philosophy with financial engineering that marks the beginning of the long decline. The successors who came after Turner got the spreadsheets right and the product wrong. The lesson is not just about procedures. It is about what happens to an organization when the person who understands why the procedures exist is no longer in the room. 1962. The little cartoon chef with the hamburger for a head is being retired. Speedee, the original McDonald's mascot created by the brothers in 1948 to represent speed and precision, has been the face of McDonald's for 14 years. Kroc replaces him with a clown named Ronald McDonald. The origin is worth knowing. Two Washington, D.C. franchise owners had been sponsoring a local children's television program. When it was canceled, they asked the actor playing the lead character, a man named Willard Scott, to create a new character for their restaurants. Scott invented Ronald McDonald. The first television spot, aired in the Washington, D.C. market in 1963, generated an 8% jump in sales. Kroc saw the numbers and understood immediately. This was not just a mascot. This was a targeting strategy. McDonald's was now the place children wanted to go, which meant it was the place parents had to take them. Ronald McDonald went national in 1965. McDonald's became the largest private operator of playgrounds in America. The Happy Meal launched in 1979, the toy frequently the primary reason a child wanted it. By the 1980s, 96% of American children could identify Ronald McDonald, more recognizable than Mickey Mouse, second only to Santa Claus globally. But there is a deeper lesson here that goes beyond child marketing. Speedee was about the system. He represented speed, efficiency, the satisfaction of a process done perfectly. Ronald was about feeling, warmth, fun, belonging, childhood. These are not the same thing. Speedee was a promise about how the hamburger was made. Ronald was a promise about how you would feel when you ate it. Systems require maintenance, discipline, constant enforcement. Feelings are much easier to generate through advertising. When McDonald's eventually had to choose between investing in operational standards and investing in marketing warmth, and that choice came, the company chose warmth. That choice, made incrementally over 2 decades, is the beginning of the operational decline the company is still recovering from. The brand is the promise. The system is the proof. When maintaining the proof becomes inconvenient, the promise becomes a lie. The customer who loves your brand is loving the version of your product that the system produced when the system was at its best. When the system deteriorates, the brand buys you time. But only time. Every great operational company eventually faces the Speedee Ronald choice. Does the brand serve the system, or does the system serve the brand? McDonald's was at its best when Speedee's values were embedded in Turner's procedures. The long decline began when the brand's emotional warmth became the goal and operational rigor became merely one tool available to support it. Consider your own organization. Is your quality structural, built into how the work is done, or is it aspirational, claimed in marketing and enforced inconsistently in practice? The answer matters more than almost anything else about your business. Ronald McDonald gave McDonald's its emotional foundation with families. What the company was about to discover was that it was building that foundation at exactly the moment competitors were studying its model, identifying its trade-offs, and building businesses around precisely the things McDonald's had chosen not to do. Here is something the official McDonald's story rarely acknowledges. McDonald's did not just build a business. It created an entire industry, and then spent 40 years at war with the companies it had inspired. Burger King, founded in 1953, positioned flame-grilled burgers as a deliberate critique of McDonald's flat grill standardization. The critique was valid. What Burger King could not replicate was the structural control mechanism underneath McDonald's operations. Wendy's opened in Columbus, Ohio in 1969. Dave Thomas had worked inside the franchise industry and understood operations. His positioning was fresh, never frozen, a direct quality challenge to both chains. The critique was valid. Wendy's could not replicate the real estate model. McDonald's learned two lessons from all of this. One was right. One was catastrophically wrong. The right lesson: competitive pressure forces improvement. The Chicken McNugget, introduced in 1983, was one of the most successful product launches in fast food history. Competition sharpened McDonald's product development in ways that internal complacency never would have produced. The catastrophically wrong lesson: menu expansion answers competitive pressure. Starting in the late 1980s and accelerating through the 90s, McDonald's began adding items: pasta, pizza, salads, and then in 1996, the Arch Deluxe. This was a burger designed specifically to attract adults, backed by a $150 million campaign that explicitly distanced itself from Ronald McDonald and the children's brand he had built. It was a direct attempt to escape the thing that had made McDonald's what it was. It failed completely. $150 million to launch a burger that told adults McDonald's was not for children. The product the campaign was distancing itself from was the most recognizable food brand in human history. The campaign spent money to undermine the company's own greatest asset. Your competitors are your most honest analysts. They will tell you, through their product positioning, exactly what your customers wish you would change. Distinguish between the trade-offs worth revisiting and the ones worth defending. The company that tries to become its critics loses what made it worth criticizing in the first place. New Coke in 1985 is the exact parallel. Coca-Cola correctly diagnosed that customers preferred Pepsi in blind taste tests. The wrong prescription was abandoning the original Coke entirely, which turned out to be what customers actually loved, not just the taste but the identity, the history, the relationship. McDonald's in the 90s made the same error. The Arch Deluxe correctly diagnosed the problem. McDonald's had lost adults. The wrong prescription was a fancier burger. The right prescription was better execution of what McDonald's already was. By the early 2000s, the cumulative effect of a decade of menu complexity, declining operational standards, and expensive failed experiments had produced a company in serious trouble. The company that had defined an industry was about to report, for the first time in its history, a quarterly loss. 1967. Harry Sonneborn is standing in Ray Kroc's Chicago office for what will be the last time. They have been building McDonald's together for 11 years. Sonneborn's real estate model has transformed the company. The public offering is 2 years away. The company Sonneborn helped design is about to become one of the great investment stories of the 20th century. And the two men can barely be in the same room. The tension has been building for years. Sonneborn sees McDonald's as a real estate and investment vehicle that happens to sell hamburgers. Kroc sees McDonald's as a hamburger system that happens to own real estate. The final break comes over a proposed acquisition. Sonneborn resigns. He sells his McDonald's stock for $3 million. Over the decade that follows, McDonald's stock splits multiple times. Had Sonneborn held until 1977, his shares would have been worth over $100 million. By his death in 1992, the shares he sold for $3 million had compounded to an estimated value approaching $1 billion. The man who invented the mechanism that made McDonald's structurally profitable received approximately $3 million for it. The skills that get you to one milestone are rarely the complete set required for the next. Build your organization so that people who are essential now are respected and well rewarded, and so that the transition to what the next phase requires does not have to be a rupture. The Sonneborn story is not primarily about money miscalculated. It is about the phases of building. The person whose contribution is essential in one phase is rarely the right person for every subsequent phase. Sonneborn's financial architecture was the foundation on which everything was built. His purely financial view of the company was the wrong lens for the operational challenges ahead. Kroc was not wrong to part ways with him. He was also not generous about it. Both things are true simultaneously. You can be right about the transition and wrong about how you handle it. Now here is the part of the Ray Kroc story that gets the least attention. The years before everything worked. This story does not have a single dramatic scene. It is 6 years of accumulating pressure that deserve as much space as any moment of triumph. Between 1955 and 1960, while McDonald's was growing and proving itself, Kroc was personally going broke. Understand why. McDonald's had not yet gone public. The IPO would not come until 1965. The shares that would eventually make him wealthy did not yet exist as anything he could spend. What he had was a royalty income that did not cover his costs, and personal assets he was borrowing against to make up the difference. He had borrowed against his house. He had borrowed against his life insurance policies. There were months in which his personal salary was garnished to cover debts accumulated in the months before. He was in his mid-50s, physically declining, personally in debt, and running an enterprise that was succeeding by every external measure while draining him financially with every passing quarter. Ethel, his wife of many years, had been watching Kroc's enthusiasms for 30 years. By the late 1950s, her waiting had become something closer to resignation. They divorced in 1961, the same year he completed the McDonald brothers buyout. He was completing the greatest transaction of his life while ending his marriage. Joan Beverly Kroc was different. She was a musician in St. Paul, Minnesota, married to a McDonald's franchisee. When Kroc first encountered her in 1957, he fell completely in love with her. He did not act on it for years. He married her in 1969. Joan understood obsession. She had lived it from the other side of the table. She did not require Kroc to be other than what he was. He died in January 1984, aged 81, in a care facility in San Diego. McDonald's had more than 7,000 locations. The system he had recognized in a San Bernardino parking lot 30 years earlier was serving 45 million customers a day. The years before the turning point are not prologue to the real story. They are the real story. What a person is willing to sacrifice, for how long, without guarantee of outcome. That is the actual measure of what they were building toward. Phil Knight ran Nike while working as a full-time accountant for years. Estee Lauder personally applied face cream at department store counters for over a decade before she had the resources to build at scale. The bleeding years are not a detour. They are where the character is formed. They are also where most people stop. The question this principle asks is not whether you can survive the bleeding years. It is whether you can identify, while you are in them, that they are the real story and not the waiting room. Everything we have covered today, the real estate mechanism in full detail, the Sonneborn model mapped completely, the broken promise, the bleeding years, the competitor wars, all of it is in the written companion document for this episode. 13 stories, the mythology audit, what the empire looks like financially today, and what Kroc would specifically do in 2026. It is the written version you can return to. The link is in the description below, for less than the price of a coffee. Early 1960s. A McDonald's purchasing agent is sitting across from a potato farmer in Idaho. The proposal is straightforward. McDonald's will purchase an enormous volume of potatoes on one condition. They must meet precise specifications. A particular variety, grown to a particular size, with a particular starch content. The farmer who can meet these requirements gets a guaranteed buyer for his entire crop, year after year. The farmer who cannot must find other customers. Eric Schlosser's reporting in Fast Food Nation documents what happened next. The standardization requirements of McDonald's transformed American agriculture from the inside out. Beef processing consolidated around a small number of enormous plants designed to process cattle at volumes and speeds that the traditional industry could not match. The workers in those plants faced injury rates among the highest of any industry in America. The potato specification that McDonald's required drove out hundreds of potato varieties that American farmers had been cultivating for generations. The American commercial potato became, in very significant measure, a McDonald's potato. No one in that early purchasing meeting was trying to transform American agriculture. They were trying to buy consistent potatoes. The consequences were the sum of thousands of individually sensible decisions, none of which had been evaluated at the scale they would eventually reach. Before you scale a practice, Ask what the world looks like when every location follows it and every supplier is forced to adapt to your requirements. The decision that is reasonable at small scale can become structurally harmful at large scale. The builder who does not ask this question is responsible for the answer regardless. This is the dimension of the cost question the official story never addresses. The lesson is not to avoid building at scale. The lesson is that the obligation to evaluate the consequences of your decisions grows proportionally with your ability to create them. The moment your decisions can reshape an industry, your decisions carry industry-scale responsibility. Let's look at what the empire actually became. McDonald's Corporation today has a market capitalization of approximately $200 billion. Its real estate holdings are valued at approximately $42 billion. There are 43,477 McDonald's restaurants globally, of which approximately 95% are franchised. Global system-wide sales exceeded $130 billion in 2024. Franchise fees and royalties generated $12.5 billion in 2023 alone. Now the operational collapse. By the late 1990s, after a decade of menu complexity, declining standards, and the Arch Deluxe failure, McDonald's reported its first-ever quarterly loss in 2002. The stock had fallen more than 60% from its peak. Franchisees were furious. The company was, in every operational sense, broken. Jim Cantalupo was brought out of retirement to lead the turnaround. His plan was called Plan to Win, a return to basics. Better food, cleaner restaurants, faster service, not new products, not new formats, just better execution of what McDonald's already was. The plan was working. 14 months into the turnaround, Jim Cantalupo died of a heart attack. His successor, Charlie Bell, was diagnosed with colorectal cancer within months of taking the role. He died 9 months later. 2 consecutive chief executives died in office during the most critical operational recovery in McDonald's history. Jim Skinner eventually completed what Cantalupo had begun. In October 2024, a multi-state E. coli outbreak linked to slivered onions on the Quarter Pounder resulted in 10 deaths and over 70 hospitalizations. McDonald's pulled the Quarter Pounder from approximately 1/5 of its United States locations. The parallel with the standards drift that Kroc and Turner spent their careers fighting is direct and unavoidable. The system Dick McDonald designed in 1948 was meant to make food safety failures structurally impossible through the precision of its processes. When the system is maintained with the discipline Kroc demanded, these failures do not happen. When it is not, they do. When Kroc died in January 1984, his estate was valued at approximately $500 million. The IPO in 1965 had changed everything. The shares he had been accumulating while personally broke, through years of borrowing against his house and his life insurance policies, compounded over 2 decades into something extraordinary. Almost all of it was McDonald's stock. Most of it passed to Joan. Joan Beverly Kroc was born in St. Paul to a modest family. Her father worked for the railroad. By the time Ray died, she had been wealthy for 20 years. The wealth had not changed what she fundamentally was. A woman who found inequality genuinely intolerable and who had the specific luxury of being able to do something about it. She gave almost all of it away. When she died in October 2003, her estate was worth approximately $2 billion. She gave $1.5 billion to the Salvation Army, the largest single charitable gift ever recorded at the time, specifically to build community recreation centers in underserved neighborhoods across America. 26 Kroc centers now operate around the country. She gave $225 million to NPR. She gave $50 million each to Notre Dame and the University of San Diego for Peace Studies Institutes. There is a thread running from Dick McDonald's chalk on a tennis court to Joan Kroc's checks that connects the beginning of this story to its end. The system Dick designed was built to serve ordinary people efficiently. Joan Kroc took the money that system generated across 6 decades and returned it, in enormous quantities, to the people the system had always been selling to. This section is speculative, but it is grounded. Every action here is based on an analogous decision Kroc made when he faced the same type of problem. He would simplify the menu aggressively and absorb the short-term revenue loss. A menu with more than 100 items is not a menu. It is a training burden, a quality consistency problem, a speed of service obstacle. Kroc, who once threatened to terminate a franchisee for adding shrimp without authorization, would have a specific view of a menu with 120 items. The system's power is inseparable from its simplicity. He knew this in 1954. He would treat the 2024 E. coli outbreak as a systems failure, not a communications problem. The correct response is not a press release and an apology. It is a complete audit of every process in the supply chain and kitchen operations that allowed the failure to occur, followed by the systematic enforcement Turner built Hamburger University to produce. He would rebuild the field consultant network. The reduction of McDonald's direct operational support to franchisees, justified on cost efficiency grounds, removed the mechanism through which standards had been enforced for decades. Kroc visited locations himself. He tasted the food. He cleaned parking lots. The field consultant is the operational immune system of the McDonald's model. When you reduce it, the model gets sick slowly. He would defend the real estate model against investors who want to monetize it. Selling the real estate and leasing it back unlocks cash. It also surrenders the structural control mechanism that Sonneborn built. Franchisees who rent from McDonald's behave differently from franchisees whose landlord is a passive investment trust with no interest in their operational standards. He would not confuse digital investment with operational improvement. The self-ordering kiosks and mobile loyalty apps McDonald's has invested billions in are genuine improvements to the ordering interface. They are not solutions to the problem McDonald's was built to solve. Technology that makes ordering faster while the kitchen remains slower and more complex than it was in 1955 is technology applied to the wrong problem. Let me give you the full picture before we close. Ray Kroc did not found McDonald's. He purchased it. The McDonald brothers founded it in 1940 in San Bernardino. The Speedee service system was designed by Dick McDonald on a tennis court in 1948. Kroc's contribution was to see what the brothers could not see, the scalability, and then to give everything he had to realizing it. Harry Sonneborn invented the financial mechanism that made McDonald's structurally profitable. Fred Turner codified the operational standards that kept the quality consistent across thousands of locations. Joan Kroc returned $2 billion to the people the company had been selling to for 6 decades. The official story needed one name. History remembers Ray Kroc. A complete understanding requires all of them. Here are the 3 things I want you to walk away with. The first is the system versus the product. Dick McDonald understood this in 1948. The company forgot it in the 90s. The forgetting cost more than the remembering ever did. In whatever you are building, ask whether your quality is structural or aspirational. One of those is a foundation. The other is a hope. The second is who gets erased. Dick drew the kitchen. Sonneborn built the financial model. Turner codified the standards. Joan returned the money. The official story needed one name. Every company that grows large enough to need a myth will simplify its history. The lesson is not cynicism. It is precision. Document the contributions that matter while you are still in a position to do so. The third is the cost. Kroc spent his body, his first marriage, and 30 years of an ordinary life to build something extraordinary. He paid the price and got the result. The question this story asks, and does not answer for you, is not whether the price was worth it to him. The question is what it cost everyone else. Dick McDonald standing in front of his own restaurant's museum, feeling like a stranger at his own funeral. Harry Sonneborn selling shares worth $1 billion for $3 million. 2 chief executives dying in office trying to defend what the system had become after the builder was gone. Joan Kroc giving away $2 billion to answer a question about inequality that 43,000 McDonald's restaurants had spent 6 decades asking. What does it cost to build something that outlasts you? Ask the people who are still paying. If this episode gave you something useful, a framework, a story, an idea you are going to carry with you, the best thing you can do is share it with one person. Not a post. One specific person who would benefit from hearing it. That is how this channel grows, and it means more than any algorithm. If you have not subscribed, do that now. New episodes come out regularly, and they follow the same format. The full story, the real mechanisms, the people who get erased, and the honest assessment of what was built and what it cost. Here is the reading list. Grinding It Out by Ray Kroc, published in 1977. His own account. Compelling, selective, and revealing in the ways he did not intend. Read it after this episode, not before. The gaps become visible only once you know what to look for. McDonald's, Behind the Arches by John Love, published in 1986 and revised in 95. The Authorized History. More honest about Sonneborn and the brothers than Kroc's memoir. The best single source on the operational and financial architecture during the growth years. Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser, published in 2001. The Essential Counterweight. His reporting on the supply chain, the labor practices, and the agricultural transformation wrought by McDonald's standardization requirements is meticulous and important. Ray and Joan by Lisa Napoli, published in 2016. The best account of Joan Kroc's life and the full context of her philanthropy fills in the chapter of the McDonald's story that the official histories barely mention. The written companion document for today's episode, Everything We Covered, in full detail, on the page, is in the description below. For less than the price of a coffee. Thanks for spending this time. I will see you on the next one.